Okay, for those of you who are just logging in, I am Carol
I'm on the
Edholm,
Zoom.
SEAPEX president, and you are at the
Well, it's just started. It's
COVID-19
two.
related Philately. If you could all mute yourself once we turn it over to Jean, that would be great. We are recording so that we can put the presentation on the website for those who have missed it. If anybody has an issue with us recording, let us know and we'll turn off the recording. Anything else? Yeah, and then just mute yourselves, and when you have a question to ask Jean. Jean, do you want people to ask later or during the presentation?
I think it'll be better to gather all the questions at the end, but people can type in stuff in the chat as well, and we can address everything at the end.
Okay, yeah, every presenter is different, so that's why I ask. So, all right, so you've got the rules, and I'll turn it over to Jean Wang from Canada.
Okay, hi everybody. So thanks a lot for inviting me to speak at or to present at SEAPEX. Actually, Seattle is kind of near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of family in Seattle. I've visited many times, but I've never had the opportunity to go to a SEAPEX. So this is one of the advantages of virtual shows, as we were just talking about. I gave a similar talk to my stamp club about just over 3 months ago now, but there's been so much stuff that's come out in the last 3 months that there's actually going to be very little overlap with the material that I presented earlier. And that earlier presentation is available on YouTube if you want to go watch it. Just search for NTSC Presents. I've got the YouTube channel down at the bottom here. So what I'm going to talk about, and I guess just to give you some background for people who don't know me, I'm a physician in Toronto, Canada, and I have an interest in medical philately. I have a thematic collection on blood donation and an exhibit, and I collect all kinds of other sort of medical related philately as well. So COVID-19 related philately was sort of a natural extension of my collection. And what I really like about thematic or topical collecting is that it lets you learn, explore and learn about all different aspects of traditional philately, because you're, finding stuff, all different kinds of philatelic elements. So I'm going to try and give a broad overview of all the different kinds of things. There's a ton of stamps, but there's also lots of other interesting aspects that are related to COVID-19 that can be collected. So I'll try and cover, a very broad area, just give the highlights. If I just wanted to show all the stamps that have been issued, that would be an hour talk by itself. So I'm obviously not going to be able to cover everything, but I'll try and give a sampling of all the different areas. So the things I'm going to cover today are, I'm just going to give a really quick introduction to what exactly is COVID-19, just to give you some context about what all these stamp issues and other things are about. And then we'll look at some COVID-19 stamps. I've tried to pick ones that have kind of an interesting story or some kind of interesting aspect to them. And then talk a bit about postal history. So, we're living in a really amazing time. We're actually, it's like living postal history, right? So there's a lot of impact on mail, returned covers, missent covers, and there's a lot of postal stationery coming out as well that people can look for. And then different kind of messages in the post, the slogan cancels, meter marks, and other kinds of pictorial cancels. And then the last thing, I'll just go over some items that you can collect related to postponed or canceled events. Okay, so just a quickie introduction. So what is COVID-19? So COVID-19 is caused by coronavirus. So coronaviruses, these are just some graphical images of coronaviruses. The name comes from this corona or crown of spikes when you look at it under EM microscopy. This is actually a picture of SARS-CoV-1, which caused the SARS epidemic a few years ago, actually more than a few years ago now. So they were first identified in the 1960s. There's 4 different strains of common human coronaviruses that constantly circulate in the population. So these are the ones that typically cause the common cold. They typically cause a very mild illness, and we don't really pay much attention to them, but people could get the cold year after year because they change a little bit from year to year. But every once in a while, you can get a coronavirus that jumps from animals to humans, and that can cause very serious disease because humans haven't seen the virus before. So the very first one that happened was SARS-CoV-1, which caused the SARS outbreak in 2002, 2003. Toronto was actually an epicenter of that outbreak. And it had a high mortality rate, about 10 to 15%. It caused pretty severe disease, but it got under control pretty quickly. And the numbers, when you look at them, I'll show you in a couple of slides, the numbers compared to what we're seeing now were really nothing. The next one that you might not even have heard about was something called MERS-CoV, which was Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. It was really a localized outbreak in the Middle East, but had very high mortality. About 1 in 3 people who caught that virus died. And now we're in the middle of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. So SARS-CoV-2, coronavirus disease 19, COVID-19. We're still kind of early in the pandemic, but it looks like the mortality rate is somewhere between 1 to 5%. There's still a lot we have to learn about it. And just to give you some perspective, the seasonal influenza that comes every fall that we get the flu shot for, that has a much lower mortality rate, only about 0.1%. So even though SARS-CoV-2 causes mild disease in most people, and it's not as lethal as the ones we've previously seen, it's still about 10 times, or more higher death rate than the seasonal influenza. So this is the timeline of what happened. So back in December of 2019, there was a cluster of pneumonia cases of unknown cause that occurred in Wuhan, China. And eventually it was identified that this was a novel coronavirus that probably came out of one of the live animal markets. At the end of January, the WHO declared that the outbreak was a public health emergency of international concern. This was their technical name for it. And then finally on February 11th, they named it, they gave it its official name, SARS-CoV-2, because it was related to SARS-CoV-1, the SARS virus. And they gave the name to the disease, which was COVID-19. And then eventually on March 11th, they declared COVID-19 to be a global pandemic. And so here in Ontario, where I live, about a week later, Ontario declared a state of emergency. Many other places have undergone similar public health measures where they ordered, people to stay at home. They closed down businesses. The state of emergency officially ended at the end of July, but it's been replaced by Bill 195 here, which basically keeps in force a lot of the measures that were taken during the state of emergency. So why has COVID-19 been such a big problem? It's kind of like a perfect storm of characteristics. So it causes very mild disease in most people. So, you get a little sick, but you're still up and around in the community. So you're around spreading the disease. It's highly contagious. It's got an R naught of 2 to 2.5, meaning every one person tends to spread it to at least 2 other people. International travel is very easy now. So the people are flying all over the place, and that's how it can, spread it from China so quickly. And then the big thing is that there's no pre-existing immunity in humans. So this is a new virus that we haven't seen before. And so everybody is susceptible. So there's no herd immunity. So these are the numbers that I showed when I gave this talk to my club 3 months ago. So as of June 11th, there were almost 8 million cases. I went to the website. Every day they update the numbers. And so this morning when I looked, it's gone up incredibly. I mean, you look at the numbers from just 3 months, it's gone from 7 million to 29 million. These are just reported cases. So there's probably much more than that because a lot of places aren't doing a lot of testing. And, almost 1 million deaths so far. And just to give you some perspective, with the SARS outbreak, there were about 8,000 cases, under 1,000 deaths. And with MERS, again, with the high mortality rate, but under 1,000 deaths, again, because there were very few cases, it was very limited. And, we've all heard comparisons to the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu happened right after World War I. And at the time, 500 million cases were reported. That was about 1/3 of the world's population at that time. And 50 million people ended up dying. But a lot of the measures, the public health measures that they took during the Spanish flu were very similar to what we're doing now. So stay-at-home orders, closing schools, closing restaurants, closing public gatherings, prohibiting public gatherings. So these are old-fashioned public health measures, but they work. And the reason why we need to take them is because, you've heard this term flattening the curve, because SARS-CoV-2 is spread through droplets and through contact with contaminated surfaces. And so measures like washing your hands, physical distancing, and staying at home, avoiding large public gatherings are the things that are going to reduce the spread. And why is this important? You say, well, most people have mild disease. Well, that's true, but there is a very real percentage of people that get very sick and need ICU admission or need ventilators. And if the denominator is really huge because there's no pre-existing immunity, everybody's susceptible, if your denominator is really huge, then the number of people that are really sick and needing ICU and ventilators will overwhelm the healthcare system if everybody gets sick at the same time. So the reason why we do these public health measures is to delay the peak or the rate of infection so that the healthcare system has the capacity to deal with the patients that are really sick. So that's it for the overview. But basically, you can see that the stamps that have come out have sort of run along certain themes related to this pandemic. So first of all, you know, at the beginning, there were a lot of countries that were very overwhelmed, and we were very grateful for the healthcare workers that were kind of on the front lines and looking after these patients and putting their own health at risk. And so a lot of the stamps honor frontline workers, so not just healthcare workers, but also other essential workers like, you know, grocery store clerks and other people in the supply chain, postal workers that have kept our lines of communication and supply open during the pandemic. Some of the stamps are have a surcharge for raising funds for charitable organizations that go either to help fight the pandemic or to help people that have been impacted by the pandemic, because a lot of people have, you know, lost jobs, businesses have closed, etc. A lot of them have messages of support and solidarity to try and, you know, keep people going and connect people, even though we're physically distanced, you know, try and keep those social connections, and then to try and help promote the public health measures as well. So this is the only stamp I'm going to show that I showed in my first talk, but I think it's noteworthy. I mean, this was the very first stamp that came out for COVID-19. You know, March 11th, it was declared a pandemic by the WHO, and less than a week later, Iran issued the first stamp. Although, you know, getting the stamp out of Iran, I think, is kind of difficult. I don't have a copy of the stamp myself. I know some people have received it, but it's very, you know, they were really kind of locked down for a while. So I don't think the stamps have really disseminated very much, but this was the first stamp that was issued. It was a tribute to their, you know, the healthcare workers. They called them national heroes. And the Iranian government actually announced that it would make the doctors and nurses that died while battling coronaviruses, they would be named martyrs. So this was the first issue. So like I said, I don't have time to kind of go through all the different issues, but I just wanted to kind of point out a few things for some of the other issues that have sort of caught my interest. So this was an issue that came out a bit later on from Isle of Man. This was issued on May the 4th with the hashtag Carry Us Through. Basically celebrating the key workers in the Isle of Man and the compassion and the fortitude of the Manx people. And a portion of the sales of the stamp actually went to, they had a fund called the Manx Solidarity Fund, which went to support people impacted by COVID. And so they issued a set of gummed stamps that you can see here. And they also provided a strip of ATM stamps that you could order from the Philatelic Bureau. So this is the strip that I got. This is actually a scan of the strip that I ordered. But I just found out recently, actually, that this was, so this strip is sort of specially printed, I guess, on special printing machines, because if you go to the actual ATM machines on the Isle of Man and you can get the same labels with the same pictures, but the printed stamps out of the machines actually look a little bit different. So you can see the denomination doesn't have the box around it like here. And when you actually look at the control number, it advances with each stamp like a normal ATM stamp strip would do. And you can get 3 different denominations. There's a domestic, a rate for Europe, and a rate for the rest of the world. So, so this is something that, you know, if you really wanted to collect what the Isle of Man people would be getting out of the ATM machines, you can email them and they'll help you to buy these. But this is sort of a, you know, philatelic version of the ATM stamps. So I thought that was interesting. This is a stamp, you know, there are, if you dig a little bit, you know, there are obviously stamps that are announced as COVID-19 stamps. This stamp was issued by Saudi Arabia on July 27th. So they issue a stamp every year for Hajj, which is, you know, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's a pilgrimage that all Muslims are supposed to do sometime in their lifetime. And they issue a stamp for Hajj every year. But this year I thought it was interesting. So it wasn't announced as a COVID-19 stamp, but certainly there are connections to COVID-19. So here, for example, this is a stamp from 2017 that shows the Kaaba, which is in Mecca. And as part of the pilgrimage, the pilgrims walk in circles 7 times around the Kaaba. And, you know, up to 2 million or more than 2 million people travel to Mecca and Medina during the Hajj pilgrimage. And you can see the crowds of people in the plaza here. Contrast that to what it looks like this year. So this year they really limited, because of COVID-19, they only allowed 1,000 pilgrims to attend Hajj this year, and no international travelers were allowed. So it was all people that were already in Saudi Arabia, and they put these lines down on the ground with circles and dashes to make sure that people were socially or physically distanced while they were walking around. So I just thought that was really interesting, and you can see the social distancing here. So, you know, you can find things like this that are connected to the theme, even though they might not be directly labeled as COVID-19. This was another interesting issue that was sort of hotly debated on, at least on Facebook, where I participate in some of the philatelic threads. So this was an issue from Singapore that came out in early August. It was called Quirks in the Island City, and it was supposed to highlight some of the quirky behaviors that happened in Singapore. And, you know, so it was 5 stamps in the set plus a souvenir sheet. So some of the things are, you know, the coffee shop jargon, and BTO, which stands for build to order. So apparently the Singapore's version of will you marry me is, do you want to apply for BTO together, like get a flat together? You know, I learned something about Singapore there. CHOPE is a restaurant reservation system online. And then you have these two that are show Wi-Fi's. So I guess Wi-Fi is a big part of the culture there. You know, selfies, Wi-Fi's, and then lining up for stuff apparently is a big thing in Singapore. They love to line up for stuff. And so people were saying, well, look, you know, they're wearing masks and they're queuing, you know, 1 meter safe distance. And this souvenir sheet showed, you know, working from home. So these are all things that we're doing as part of COVID-19. But apparently it was already kind of part of Singapore culture. This issue had been planned for months ahead of time. And, you know, it's possible, I guess, that they maybe tweaked it a little bit to put in the safe distance here. But I think actually that this probably wasn't intended to be a COVID-19 issue. Although some people may want to, you know, you could show this in a thematic exhibit if you wanted to show some of the behaviors that other countries are certainly adopting in terms of public health measures. But Singapore actually, a month later, did come out with an actual COVID-19 issue. So this was released just in time for school restarting. And it was really focused or aimed at the teachers and students as school restarted to try and enforce public health measures, you know, like washing hands, cleaning surfaces, checking temperatures, wearing a mask, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, Singapore likes to make things very cute. So this was, you know, geared towards the kids, I guess, and they called it the Super 5. So the kind of band of superheroes to try and keep themselves and everybody else safe. So this was dedicated to the teachers and staff and the students. And it was announced as Series 1. So I don't know how many series they're planning to actually issue later on. And I'll come back to this a bit later when I talk about some of the slogan cancels. The latest one was just 2 days ago. So this was issued by France. So France typically in their, you know, issues self-adhesive booklets of 10 or 12 stamps. And this was no different. So this was a COVID-19 issue that it's a self-adhesive booklet of 12 stamps, and each pane sort of has a different theme. So the left pane is about caring and people that, you know, save others or help rescue others. The middle pane is supporters, people who, this is like a social assistance, you know, the police, and garbage collectors, the people that are assisting in the community. And then this is all about the supply chain. So maintaining truckers, farmers, et cetera, maintaining the supply chain. So this was the latest. And I'm sure if I give this talk a month or 2 months later, there's going to be many other issues coming out as well. So here's the whole list. This is why I couldn't cover everything. So there's been 35 official stamp issues from postal administrations, and there are still more planned. So I've heard that there are stamps coming out from Malaysia, India, Egypt, and Spain, although no dates or designs have been announced for those. But you can see almost, you know, I think we're going to get to the point where almost every country, or many countries, you know, because this is something that impacts the world and has global relevance. So of course, it's not surprising that it's such a widespread topic for stamp issues. Just a couple other things, you know, other than what's actually on the stamps, you can actually look at, you know, in a thematic collection, it's nice to look at stuff that's, you know, not just on the stamp, but maybe there's other or ancillary or, things that are kind of around the stamps or like labels or something in the selvage. So here, for example, on the Thailand sheet, the color control dots were actually in the shape of coronavirus. And then they have on the selvage here, together we fight against COVID-19. Taiwan issued a pair of stamps, and there was a label in between the stamps that said Taiwan can help. And in Chinese here, it says unite for epidemic prevention and defeat the virus. So again, these are not actually on the stamps themselves, but are sort of extra little things. These are different kinds of philatelic elements that can enhance a collection. This one's really interesting. So this is a soutenant strip of 3, I guess. I don't know if soutenant applies to more than 2, but it's a strip of 3 stamps that was issued by Indonesia in mid-August, Unite Against COVID-19. And the sheet format is interesting. So it's 3 strips down the middle, and then 3 columns, I guess, of the same designs, but split up. But the interesting thing about this sheet is actually when you look at it under UV light, coronaviruses will light up under UV light. And so what this actually means is that every stamp on the sheet is unique because it has a different UV labeling. So even though, under white light, these strips of 3 look the same, when you look at them under UV, they're going to have different labeling. So you'll actually be able to take any stamp from this sheet and tell exactly where on the sheet it came from originally. So I thought that was kind of cool. So leaving official stamp issues now, there's been a ton of personalized stamps as well. So both from private individuals, like in Canada, we have picture postage, where you can submit a picture and order a picture postage stamp, and they'll send you a sheet of 25 or booklets. So many countries provide this service where you can submit a picture and then and then you can order the stamps. So people like to do that for, holiday invitations and things like that, put a photo, family, things like that. But a lot of organizations have also done personalized stamps related around the COVID-19 theme. So a lot of stamp clubs, stamp and coin clubs, for example. So this is one that was done by Postal, which is a big, I think it's one of the largest collector associations in France. So they ordered this. So this booklet is what La Poste calls a collector booklet. So La Poste actually sells sort of official personalized stamps that you can actually order through their online website. This one was ordered through this association, but you could only order the stamps directly from the association. So it wasn't available for sale from La Poste, and it was only available for sale for a 2-month period, or 3-month period, I guess, from June to the end of August. And the stamp designs were basically to thank healthcare workers and to thank support workers. You see the same old guy here on the 2 stamps. And they were available in 2 denominations. So lettre verte, which is like their domestic, slow mail kind of thing, and lettre prioritaire, which is a domestic also, but a faster service, I think, within a day. So they came in booklets of 4, or you could get like a sheet of 10 or a sheet of 40, I think. I can't remember exactly what the formats were. But, it's so you could order this, but it's also actually nice to try and get them actually used on mail. So these were a couple of covers that a friend of mine in France sent to me. So he bought the booklet that had the lettre prioritaire stamps, and he basically just mailed these covers to himself, and then he sent them to me. So these are actual circulated covers with the stamps, actually fulfilling what their intended function is. So sometimes it's actually harder to find this kind of stuff, real commercially used mail, as opposed to just ordering the mid stamps. In Germany, there's a whole network of private post companies. So there are many different regional posts, and some of them will deliver nationwide. Some of them only deliver in their particular region. The ones that deliver nationwide often will also deliver internationally, but they cooperate with each other. So they'll hand off mail, if one company only delivers regionally, they'll hand off to another company, and they'll hand off to it's like how the different postal administrations normally cooperate, except that these are private posts. And so a number of them, there's many of them in Germany, but a number of them have issued stamps related to COVID-19. So these are, on the themes of like letter writing, remaining strong, gemeinsam stark in der Region. This is a Berlin company. So, remaining strong, stay at home, we help together. So all this, the same kind of messages that you see on other stamps. But again, you know, so it's a little bit more complicated trying to get these stamps because a lot of them will only deliver within Germany. But I have a friend in Germany who collects these who was able to help me get some of these. And then the other great thing is to try and get them actually used on mail, right? So this is an example of a stamp from a company called Brief und Mehr. So they are located in Münster, which is sort of on the north west part of Germany. And so the letter rate, the international letter rate for them was €1. So this is the 70 cents plus the two 15-cent stamps. So this letter has a marking, a barcode from it says BMM to the world. So this is from the Post. So there's another private company called Postcon, which has a sorting center in Neuss, which is a little bit closer to the Dutch border, a little bit south. And then it was passed to the Dutch mail service because this is a blue hand stamp. It's a little bit hard to see, but it says Post NL, so Post Netherlands. So this letter, you know, went from Münster to Neuss and then to Netherlands and then to Canada. So it's kind of cool, you know, trying to piece together the route that these covers travel on. Okay, so this is another really interesting one. So this, of course, so Mexico has a series of, their sort of current series of definitives are related to folk art, and they normally issue only gummed stamps. But what they did, and these have been reprinted many times with different denominations, and you know they have different control numbers. But what the Mexican government ordered an emergency printing or reprint of these definitive stamps because they didn't want people licking the back of the stamp. So they ordered an emergency printing of self-adhesive stamps. So you can see some of them here. I think there are actually maybe 10 or 12 in the, or I guess 12 in the set. There's only 11 here, but this is all I was able to find online. But these are very crudely printed. They're kind of really crudely rouletted. They're self-adhesive, so they're really hard to kind of tear apart without damaging them. You can see this one's a little torn here. And there's also this one, which I think is a new commemorative, but it's also self-adhesive. So, you know, these were ordered by the postal authorities as an emergency printing so that people wouldn't have to lick their gummed stamps. But apparently they're not being used very much because the postal clerks are mostly using labels and not really ordering these. So these are actually a bit hard to find. But again, so if you look at these, it has, you know, the picture has nothing to do with COVID-19, but it's the story behind it that connects it to COVID-19. So I thought that was really interesting. And then for people who collect Cinderella stamps or fantasy stamps, there are a number of what are called artist stamps by the Perforated Post. So this is a company that prints sort of these labels that you could use for decorating your mail. You know, this is a picture of how they suggest that you can, you know, put it on the back of your envelope or put it on the front even to decorate. And they've got some issues that, so this one here is a strip of 7 stamps honoring healthcare workers. They've got one here, you know, that says no licking was involved in the sealing of this envelope with a picture of the virus in the middle. And then this one doesn't mention COVID, but it's thanking the postal workers, you know, who have really come through, I think, in connecting people and keeping people socially connected through this pandemic. So, you know, so these are ancillary things that you can collect, you know, maybe not traditional philately, but certainly an aspect of COVID-19 related philately that I think is interesting. Okay, I just wanted to say a couple words about, because you'll see when you go online, if you go to like eBay or Del Camp, you know, the online auction sites, you'll see a ton of stamps that have come out from these agencies. So agencies, the 2 biggest agencies are Stamparija, which is based in Lithuania and Eastern Europe, and IGPC, which stands for Intergovernmental Philatelic Corporation, which is based in New York. So these are philatelic agencies that contract with countries, you know, a lot of them in Africa, a lot of poorer countries. And they contract with them so that they are authorized to issue stamps in the name of the country. So the country's name is on the stamp, but very often these are specially made and targeted to the collector market. So, you know, they target to topical collectors, and often the subject of the stamp has nothing to do with the country that's supposedly issuing the stamp. And in the vast majority of cases, the stamps are not available for purchase in the actual country, and they're, you know, the face values are way too high for anything that would be used for postal service in the country. And the money, you know, doesn't probably doesn't go to helping anybody in the country. You know, it's just profit for these companies. So a lot of collectors don't really consider these sort of, you know, even though they're legal, they kind of consider them as sort of wallpaper, is one term that you'll hear. So legal, but, you know, maybe not entirely legitimate for, like, you know, if you want to keep to kind of respected postal agencies. So this was one of the early ones that came out, one of the early designs, which you'll probably see around, you know, and like, honestly, what does the penny black have to do with COVID-19, right? So this is a design, the penny black against COVID-19. And what they did was they took a sheet, 6 penny black stamps, and they just put different styles of masks on the penny black. And so, you know, this is issued by the Central African Republic, but Central African Republic is a war-torn country. They have not had an international, let alone domestic postal service probably for a few years now, just because of the disruption in the country. So, you know, you would never find this on a piece of mail. And you know, they didn't stop at just the one country. So back in June, when I gave this talk, there were 3, and now there are 9. So when I looked a couple of days ago, there are now 9 countries that have issued stamps sheets in this set. And in every sheet, you know, the styles of the masks are different. That's basically the difference. I hope eventually they're going to run out of mask styles, but, you know, so it's kind of, it's, you know, and then they also come in perforated variety. There's an imperf variety, you know, so these are like $7 to $10 a pop. So, you know, if you've got a lot of money to spend, like, it's, sure, you can buy all this stuff, you know, you order it direct from the agency. They're printed in Lithuania, and they come direct from the agency. But I think this is not, you know, it's not really serious philately. Now, you know, I'm obviously not going to tell anybody what to collect, and some people might think these are kind of whimsical and interesting, but it can get expensive. Where it can get actually kind of interesting is that in some places, so in most of these, like I said, you know, you wouldn't be able to get them locally, but in Togo might be an exception. So in Togo, there's actually a fellow here who, you know, as his sort of business, I don't know if it's his whole business, but as part of what he does for his, to make some money, is he can get the stamps locally. So they're available at the philatelic office in Togo. And if you send him money, he'll actually take the stamps and put them on covers and mail them to you and postmark them from Togo. So, you know, so this actually represents postal use of these stamps. The international rate from Togo to, you know, North America is 800 francs, and each of these stamps is 550. So it's overpaying a little bit if you use 2 stamps, but, you know, you can't obviously break them down. So, you know, this might be a more fun or more maybe legitimate or postal way to collect these stamps. But I think for a lot of the countries, you would not be able to do this. You'd have to find someone locally to do it, or buy the stamps and then travel to the country yourself, which of course we can't do right now. This is another series that's just coming out also from Stamperia, Famous Monuments of the World in Quarantine. So again, they've taken pictures of different famous monuments and put masks on them. But like, if you look at this picture of Mount Rushmore, this isn't even the actual Mount Rushmore. I think it's a picture of, you know, China has some parks where they make replicas of famous monuments. And I think this is from one of those parks. And, you know, it's possible some of these other ones are as well. Anyway, so I'm sure this will also proliferate into many other countries for sure. Right now there are 3. So IGPC is the other big agency, and they've got a series called A Tribute to Those on the Front Line. So these are from, these are the 5 that are have been published so far. And again, you know, they're just like churning them out, right? And you know, often these are, you know, maybe with Tuvalu you can get them at the philatelic office, but I think a lot of these, you know, if you order them, they'll come from New York because that's where they're being printed. Okay, so that's it for stamps. So I just want to switch now to talk about postal history. Like I said, we're living through an amazing time, you know, the worldwide change in how we live and how we work and how we interact with each other. And, you know, the mail is no exception. There's a lot of impact on the mail and what's happening with mail. And even though things are kind of getting back to normal now, there was a lot of mail disruption, especially, you know, through the spring and early summer. And so a lot of covers have interesting markings that you can find from many different countries. And, you know, so I've got a few in my collection. I'll just show you a few highlights of them. But, you know, movement of mail impacted by COVID-19. And then I'm going to show you some examples of postal stationery from different places as well. So, so in Canada Post, you can go online and you can search. Canada Post provides a list of countries where mail service is available. So they updated that recently on August 7th, but prior to that, there were a lot of countries where mail service was not available. And so I actually sent a letter to a collector in Malaysia as an exchange back in June without checking that list first. And so the letter ended up coming back to me, which was really interesting. So it's got a return to sender label. Here's a close-up of it. And this label actually can be peeled so that you can peel it easily without leaving any damage on the envelope. And it says you can repost the item without charge when service resumes. So mail to Malaysia has resumed now. I can peel this label off and send it in the mail again, even though the stamp, has already been canceled. Presumably Canada Post won't object to it. So the other interesting thing though is I sent another cover. So once I got wise to that, I thought, oh, let me try and send some covers to countries where there's no service available to see if I can get some more interesting, return to sender covers. So I sent a few covers to the United Arab Emirates. I have a friend there. And so this one came back to me. So also it looks like the same return to sender label, but it's actually a little bit different. It's got a different serial number here. And you can kind of see a hint of it here, but there's something underneath. So when you lift up the bottom here is actually not adhesive. So when you lift it up and sort of peel it, there's a sticker underneath it, which is transparent over the address, which says, so this is what it says, resumed service, postage paid in English and French. So this makes it more obvious that actually the rate has already been paid and the service is resumed and you can return it. So you're meant to, peel it off and send it back once the service resumes, but I'm going to hang on to this one for my collection. In the US, they have similar kind of, or different, but same idea. This one was a cover that was sent to India, an address in India, mailed in early May and returned to the sender in early June. It says return to sender, and on the back, there's another label that says service suspended. So, another interesting piece of postal history for COVID-19. And here you can actually request a postage refund. So you're not supposed to repost it. You're supposed to go and get a refund, which I think a lot of people, for 1 or 2 pieces of mail, $1 or whatever it is, they're probably not going to bother. This is, I thought, a really nice mark. So this was a cover that was sent from Taiwan to me, although he knew that there was no postal service, but he wanted to get this return cover. So they've got a nice pictorial hand stamp, which basically says return to sender due to COVID-19, incoming mail service suspended by destination countries. So that's a nice piece for a collection. This is one from Australia Post with a label that says service suspensions resulting from COVID-19. So some of the markings mention COVID-19 explicitly, and some of them just say suspended service or whatever, but it's all within this period. this one was mailed April 3rd. To Jamaica. So it's all within this period. So it's all really interesting. And, this is one aspect, like if you're collecting the mint stamps, you can get a complete collection, but if you're collecting returned mail, there's obviously limitless possibilities and of mail from different countries that you can try and get. So with respect to postal stationery, many countries at the beginning of the pandemic, so, March, April, May, issued postcards, which they distributed to homes within their country that could be mailed for free, and they were trying to encourage people to, send a letter, send a card, to write, to keep in touch with people. So this was Ireland's version. They actually printed 4 postcards. So it was printed on 2 cards. So each of these is 1 sheet, and then you're supposed to cut it in half, and then on the back, the had a prepaid indicium that you could mail it anywhere in Ireland for free. And they were bilingual, so 1 in English, 1 in Irish. And the hashtag was right now. So the idea was that, they wanted people to post pictures of cards that they got with the hashtag right now. And you could go on Instagram and search that hashtag and you would see examples of the card being used. So that was a nice thing. So these are rather pretty. I quite like them. Another piece of postal stationery was in the US. So when President Trump sent out his coronavirus guidelines, it was a postage paid card. So it was sent out to 130 million households at the end of March, listing all the public health measures that you were supposed to take. And, so I don't know so obviously it's not a rare card, but maybe a lot of people didn't keep it. So it might not be such an easy thing to find, but this is certainly something, a piece of philatelic mail that you can keep in a COVID-19 collection. And then a lot of other places, so Jersey in mid-April had this set of 2 postcards. Again, it was printed as 1 card and you had to cut it in half. This was the indicium, so you could mail it for free anywhere in Jersey. Gibraltar had a similar sort of rainbow design with postage free in Gibraltar. And then Isle of Man, so this is part of that set of stamps that I showed you earlier. They issued 1 postcard that had worldwide postage paid indicium, actually. So this could be mailed to anywhere, not just to Isle of Man. So these are all nice sort of postcards. So more recently, this is a little bit different. More recently, a couple of postcards have popped up in the Czech Republic. So in the Czech Republic, they have a really big collector fair. So, stamps, coins, really anything that you collect, it's a huge fair. They have one in the spring and one in the fall, but the one in the spring was canceled or postponed. And the one in the fall actually just happened. So it was on 11th and 12th, and they did it with, social distancing measures and everything, but it actually went ahead. And so Czech Post issued a couple of postcards to commemorate the fall fair. So this one actually has a little marking here that says Spring Collectors Fair postponed to autumn due to COVID-19. And then this one here has a little statement here that says the first philatelic exhibition after COVID-19 pandemic in Europe. So I think this is maybe a little optimistic. I don't think we're through the pandemic, but certainly it's the first big collector fair that's happened in a while. So these 2 are official postcards. You can order them from the Czech Post website. They have a little hologram here. So these are official postal stationery. The letter B is domestic postcard rate. And I think these were sold for a little bit more. So the domestic postcard rate, I think, is 19 krona, and the postcards were sold for 24. Okay, so other than postcards, there's other types of postal stationery as well. So in Canada, we have what's called personalized ad mail. So companies can order, when they do their bulk mailings, they can order they can personalize the indicium on the envelope. So rather than just, a plain postage paid indicium, they can actually add a picture, and that, can help to attract attention to the envelope, catch your eye more so that you won't tend to throw out your junk mail so quickly. These are a couple of envelopes that were circulated sort of in May and June that have COVID-19 related indicium. So this one is from a hospital foundation that's got a healthcare worker with the visor and the mask. This one is from Baycrest, which is like a senior's home. And so there's a picture of a senior wearing her mask. So these are, these are junk mail, but even in your junk mail, sometimes you can find things that are collectible. And these are official Canada Post indicium. So even though they're not originated from Canada Post, they are authorized by Canada Post. So technically, I think they fall within the sort of thematic rules. This one is an envelope from Romania, and there's a lot of these sort of unused envelopes being offered on sale on Delcamp. So I was able to find out that these were envelopes that were ordered by a private company, a utility company, because they wanted to send out some mail to their customers. So 100,000 copies were printed. And in Romania, you can order the envelopes, but you don't have any say over any control over the design. So apparently Postal Romana came up with this design, which they then passed on to the company, and the company used the envelope. So most of these have been used, but it's been very difficult to actually find used copies of it. So the indicium is kind of cool. It's got a mask on it, and there's all kinds of messages on here related to the public health measures. But like I said, it's pretty easy to find mint copies or unused copies, but the challenge would be to find a real postally used example. And then the latest thing that's come out in this category is an aerogram, actually, from Vatican City that was just issued on September 10th to honor healthcare workers, martyrs and heroes of the coronavirus. And you can see the indicium shows a vaccine, killing the coronavirus. So again, the challenge, I think, is going to be to find postally used examples, especially from Vatican City. It's tough to have contacts there that can maybe mail you something. Okay, and so let's move on. So I'm going to just show you now some COVID-19 messages that come in the post. So these are messages generally that are promoting some of the public health measures, or spreading messages of solidarity. And the different categories that you can look for are machine cancels, and these can either be like stamped on or inkjet spray cancels, meter marks with slogans, and then pictorial cancels, which are stamped on by hand. So Singapore has some really lovely ones. These are nice pictorial machine cancels. So in Singapore, so this is under the hashtag Here With You. So in early April, they announced their sort of preventative measures, which they called a circuit breaker. And they originally were going to apply them from April 7th to May 4th. And so they planned to have some pictorial cancels that changed every couple of weeks to, to send out messages during this period of the circuit breaker. But then on April 21st, they actually extended the measures to the beginning of June. So then they added on another 2 weeks with this design here. And so you can collect these, this is where you can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want, right? So on one level, if you wanted to collect these, you can just collect one of each kind. So this is what they look like on envelopes. These were letters that were mailed out with sort of a greeting series of stamps. But there's 6 different cancel styles, because you can see there's one repeated here. So there's 6 different types of cancels. So if you just want to collect one of each, that's great, you can do that. But you'll notice that within the date stamp, there's the indicator C1 or C2. So there's 2 different canceling machines, C1 and C2 machines. And so if you wanted to, you could collect different, so this is the same design, but the different date periods, right? So this one was from the first 2 weeks. This one is from the third set of cancels, both from C1 machine. And you can also collect the same design, but from different machines. So this is the same design here that was used the last 2 weeks, but here's one from C1 and here's one from C2. And actually this is the first day of use and this is the last day of use. So those are nice dates to get as well. So, you can just get one of each kind, or you can try and get one from every machine and every time period. You can be as detailed as you want when you're collecting this kind of stuff. And now that Singapore has issued their own COVID stamps, they've actually reintroduced these cancels. So they've announced that they're going to do these cancels again, just for 1 week periods this time for the next month. And so that will allow collectors to actually get the cancels with the coronavirus stamps. So, there's more concordance here. So this is one from the first week, from the first day of use, from the C2 machine. And again, here, the designs are repeated, but they're different periods. And so you can try and get all of these over the coming month. Some of these are offered on eBay. I think the people in Singapore that are offering these basically take a whole bunch of letters and throw them in mailboxes and cross their fingers that they're going to get both different kinds. They go to different mailboxes to try and get both C1 and C2, because I think it's just luck which ones you end up getting, which mail sack goes to which machine. Ireland had some spray-on cancels as well. So these are, the message here was stay at home from the health services. So this is a nice one actually with a stamp that shows a suitcase. So it's a little bit ironic because we're not traveling anywhere these days, right? Stay at home. So this is a nice cancel that you can collect. Ireland has 3 different mail centers. So you can, if you wanted to, you can try and collect one from each mail center. So this one is from Port Louise, but there's also Athlone and Dublin. So you can try and get one from each center here. So there's only 3 centers, so that's not too hard to try and look for those. Australia had a cancel start sometime in late April. I couldn't find an exact date, but it's still in use. So if you get mail from Australia, you may still have this cancel on it. It says stay safe and connected, Australia. And the nicest covers to get this on are these sort of commercial envelopes that are postage paid. So you don't have a stamp here that kind of distracts from the cancel, and the cancel is nice and clear. So this is a nice clear example. Some of them are not so nice and clear. These are inkjet cancels. So again, in Australia, there are 4 mail centers. So this is Sydney West, SWLF, and there are, and I can't remember I have it written down somewhere, but there's 3 other mail centers that are doing this slogan cancel. So you can try and get one from each. but also at each center, there's different machines. So the 460 here refers to the actual machines. So at Sydney, there's 4 different machines. So altogether, there's 12 different combinations that you can get. So you can try and collect, you know, depending on how obsessive or how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. I've got 11 of these 12. I'm still missing, I think, the 456 one from NMC. So, you know, it makes it kind of fun to try and hunt for all these different ones. You know, but there are limits even to my obsessive compulsiveness. So in Germany, they have a, so this is a machine stamped on cancel that started July 1st, which is still in use. So it's, the message is Gemeinsam gegen Corona, so together against Corona. And on the side here, it says protect yourself and others. And so the letter center here is indicated by the number. Briefzentrum stands for letter center. And so there are 99 letter centers in Germany, and 77 out of the 99 are using this slogan. So if you really wanted to, and I know some people are trying to get all 77, not me, but you know, it's to each his own, right? So these are stamped on by these canceling machines, which are the older machines. So I actually have a number 1 and a number 99. So for me, that's good enough. I've got the you know, the smallest and the biggest. But there's actually an interesting variety. So there's this one. So some of the centers have these more modern inkjet printing modules installed, and they have, it's the same motif, but and you know, same wording, but it's arranged a little bit differently. And these are only at a few centers. So you could conceivably try and get, you know, these, all of these that are available. I've only seen, I think, 21, 60, and 99 so far online. So I haven't seen the other ones. But I have this nice sort of matched set with 99 with the stamped on cancel and 99 with the inkjet cancel. So for me, that I'm satisfied with that. And then Canada started an inkjet slogan cancel in May, so on May 1st, which is also still in use. So if anybody, you know, anybody wants a letter from Canada with the slogan cancel, you can contact me. I'm happy to mail you a letter. And it's bilingual, English and French, as all Canada Post stuff is. And so this is applied on all mechanically sorted letter mail that goes through their optical readers. And right now, I just emailed a friend yesterday to get an updated list, but so when you look at the top numbers here indicate the date. The M4L is the postal code of the mail center, so this one's from Toronto, and then the 4 digits here are the machine. So there are some, like in Toronto, I think there's more than a dozen machines. So altogether, he's collected, or he knows about at least 44 different machines in 10 different cities that have been recorded. So, you know, that's a pretty big number. I don't, you know, I'm not going to go for that because there's some from places that I don't usually get mail from. But, you know, if you have connections, you could conceivably try and get all of those. The interesting thing is, you know, this is applied on outgoing mail, but it also sometimes gets applied on ingoing mail, so, or incoming mail. So this is a letter that I got from Hong Kong from a friend back in mid-July. And I've now gotten the slogan on about 3 or 4 different pieces of incoming mail, and it always is this machine 3825 in Toronto. So I think there's only one machine maybe that processes incoming mail that applies this slogan. So that's nice, actually, once in a while to get that on an incoming piece of mail. Australia is the other country I know that also applies their slogan on incoming mail, and they tend to do it upside down on the bottom of the cover. So that means you can actually, if you're really lucky, get something like this. So this is an outgoing letter from Canada to Australia that got the outgoing Canada Post slogan, and it got the incoming Australia slogan. So it's a really nice cover that's got 2 different slogans on it related to COVID-19. So that's kind of cool. These are, you know, obviously less common. So other than the slogan cancels, some places have meter marks that have COVID-19 related messages. So these are a couple from Morocco. This is from, I think these are coming from banks. So different banks, or these I think actually were from the Postal Czech company that's associated with Morocco Post. There's a short version and a longer version, but the text is the same. It translates to stay at your homes to stop the pandemic. So this was seen, I think, or done sort of April to May. And then more recently, there's one that has showed up, which translate to let us contribute to protecting each other by downloading the Wikatna app. So there's this is their local tracking app. We have one in Canada now that helps to trace contacts with COVID-19. So this is promoting using that app. So that's something that's just popped up in the last week or so on Delcamp. And then there are pictorial cancels. So there's, these are a little bit harder to track down. You kind of have to look. A lot of postal agencies will announce upcoming pictorial cancels so that it gives collectors a chance to send covers in and ask for the cancel. So I know USPS does that, but there are many other countries that do that as well. So this is one that was coming out of Slovakia in late May with a picture of the Virgin Mary, the Lady of Seven Sorrows with the 7 daggers in her heart. And the slogan here translates to Our Lady of Sorrows protects us from coronavirus. This is an interesting one from Romania that was used on one day, June 17th, at the Otopeni Airport Post Office, which celebrated resumption of international flights after a 95-day suspension. So that's what it says here. You can see the 95 days there. And then this one, I had to do a little bit of digging to figure this one out, but this is from Portugal. So APAO stands for the Pan-Iberian Association of Olympic Academies. And they held a series of virtual seminars discussing sport in the era of COVID. So that's what this translates to, Desporto na era do COVID. And it was a series of 3 seminars on June 4th, 11th, and 18th. So this cancel was used on one day on the last date of the last seminar. So that's kind of interesting. It's got the COVID, it's got the coronavirus there. And then just in the last few minutes, I'm going to talk about, it's almost 3, just some, you can collect stuff around canceled or postponed events. So in the US, there's been a couple of cancels that I know of. One was Fleet Week in New York was canceled. So it was scheduled for late May, it was canceled in late March, and then later it was converted to a virtual event. But you can send away for these cancels. And this is just this is a very nice cover that I saw on eBay. I just pulled this from an eBay listing. So you can send in personal, your own, you can design your own covers to get the cancel, or you can have the covers mailed to you so they can be addressed or unaddressed. This was another one, Pensic War 49. So this is a sort of medieval camping event by the Society for Creative Anachronism. They do one every year, and was postponed. This year's was postponed to 2021. So there was a cancel made for that. And this is another cover that I found. I think it's the same seller on eBay. Things that don't have COVID on them, but are definitely related. So London 2020 obviously was a big international stamp exhibition that ended up being postponed to February 2022. So this is the booklet. It was already printed, with the logo for 2020. I'm not sure what they're going to do with the logo for 2022. This kind of worked out nicely with the London, but so I have this in my collection. It's just an interesting part of the story. In France, the big Paris Philately was canceled on April 7th. And so La Poste actually had printed these booklets. They're just domestic rate booklets with advertising for the Philately on the back. And they just reissued them with a big red cancellation mark on the back. So that's something else. New Zealand 2020 was another big international exhibition. This was probably one of the first big international exhibitions to be canceled. So it was for mid-March. So about a week before it was supposed to go on, it was downgraded from international to a national show because people couldn't travel to New Zealand. And then the show was actually closed early on the 21st because of the government imposing more strict public health measures. And so the Australian Philatelic Federation had overprinted 100 sheets to support the show that they were going to sell at the show, but they never made it to New Zealand. So what they did was they took them and they put an additional overprint canceled due to COVID-19, and they sold those for $20. And so those are really, there's only 100 of them. And so those are very hard to find. Melbourne International Stamp Exhibition was postponed from 2021 to 2022. Australia Post overprinted 200 of these Queen Elizabeth mini sheets and gave them to the exhibition committee, and they sold them from their website to support the exhibition. Locally, stamp clubs too. So I know Trevor Ashman, I think, is in the audience. So local stamp clubs often will do up covers to sell at their stamp shows, and so the Medicine Hat, which is in Alberta, was going to do a spring show on April 4th, ended up being canceled. And Trevor had all these covers sitting there, which he'd already, paid for. So, so he ordered a canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic through Vistaprint, got a little nice red hand canceller and canceled these covers and sold all 100 covers that he had made. And he told me that he normally never sells out his covers. So it was a nice way to, you know, kind of bring some money back to the club. And then of course, these are my last two slides now. The big sporting event that was canceled, obviously this year or postponed, was Tokyo Olympics. So not canceled. First time actually Olympics have been postponed rather than canceled. So this was announced in March. But of course, Japan usually starts issuing stamps for Tokyo Olympics or for their Olympic Games, you know, way ahead of time. So these were issued last March already. So, you know, something to commemorate an event that ended up being canceled. They're going to use the same logo when they run the games again next year. And other countries had issued stamps. You know, they'd already sort of gone too far in their production line to cancel it. So they ended up just issuing them anyway. So these came out from Liechtenstein in June. And then I just got these images 2 days ago, actually. So this is a really lovely item. So this is a Japanese prepaid postcard. So it's 70 yen, which pays the international postcard rate. It was issued on April 1st. So it's got a first day cancel. It was mailed to Austria. And it's commemorating Tokyo 2020. So that, you know, it's commemorating a canceled event due to COVID. And it was returned to the sender with this little piece of paper from the post office that was taped to the card. And on it is the message that it cannot be delivered to the address company due to suspension of acceptance. So it's a really cool, you know, it's got multiple connections to COVID-19. I think it's a really neat piece of postal history. Okay, so I'm sorry, I think I took up actually the whole hour. These are some of the sources I've used. There's a blog from Mark Joseph Joachim that details a lot of, he basically posts new issues, but he's got a lot of information around COVID-19 issues. And I think he's making a checklist of all the issues. This website had a sort of checklist of a lot of different COVID-19 related stuff. And a lot of the images are from my collection, but also images from Facebook and online postal sites, et cetera. And I've had a lot of help from all my philatelic friends around the world. So I need to thank them. And that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions and hope everyone stays safe.
Wow, Jean, that's impressive, the amount of research you've put into that. That's wonderful. I appreciate it. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions. And it looks like we've got a couple comments here on chat too. There's comments and one question from Keith. Do you know if Canada and US are going to issue anything COVID-related stamps?
So at the moment, I don't believe so. I have not heard anything at all. At least for Canada. I don't know about you. I don't have connections with US, but.
I haven't heard anything. Lisa, have you heard anything for the US? Okay. Vera? No? All right.
But, you know, we're early in the pandemic. There's still lots of time.
Plenty of time. Yeah. Anybody else got any questions?
I have just a comment. Jean, that was a wonderful talk, really very detailed in an area that's quite new, and I'm impressed with how much information you were able to put together and organize well. If you want to get a little more into the weeds, those postcards, postal cards that came out to every address in the United States, aren't all exactly identical. They probably use multiple printers, but I have two different versions. One, the typical version, and another which has a very glossy type paper. So there may be some opportunities there to find different versions of the same card.
That's really cool. Is the printing different at all, or just the appearance of the paper?
On those, the printing is exactly the same. So it's a paper difference.
Yeah.
I have only, however, about 20 or 30 of them, and I only have them from maybe 3 different areas. So I haven't actually been able to assess how that relates outside of the state of Georgia.
That's really cool. You know, once I realized that this was a postal stationery card, I emailed a bunch of my US friends and they had all thrown them away, you know, or couldn't find them. So, you know, even though there's 130 million of them originally, I don't think there's going to be that many that survived.
Okay, there's a comment on chat from Howard Wunderlich. One of the modern British local posts, Puffin Island, issued a set of 4 labels for the local post relating to COVID. You can add that to your list. IME has stated, wonderful presentation. I'm particularly impressed with the slides. What program do you use?
I use PowerPoint. So I just have a subscription to Office 365. So I always have the latest PowerPoint. And something that I found recently was, so you'll notice a couple of the slides, I had things moving around when I did the transition. So there's a really easy thing that you can do with the transitions called Morph, and it will do it automatically for you. So it makes it look a lot slicker than you could do it yourself, I think.
I'm going to have to bone up on my PowerPoint then, obviously.
I do a lot of presentations at work, so I use PowerPoint a lot.
Nice, great job, Jean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another comment, are you going to share your COVID-19 list with the ATA?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, virtual shows need to become more common by Tricia. Yeah, so people, looks like they're enjoying your presentation. It's a wonderful job, definitely. Anybody else got any comments, questions? Go ahead and unmute.
It was wonderful, very entertaining. I learned a lot and I'm thrilled. And I now have I understand how you got the grant with the topical exhibit, and I have no doubt this one will too. And I can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
Very impressive job, very informative, and I enjoyed it a lot.
As you can see, I love talking about this stuff. So happy to share.
My understanding is you're going to be doing this again in October with a different format. Can you tell people about that so they can clock in on it?
So Dawn is on, but I think ATA is planning a series of virtual talks for October stamp collecting month. Is that right? And,
that's right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do it at the end of October, and there's probably going to be new stuff coming out between now and then. But if there isn't enough to fill a whole talk, I'll probably pull elements from both of my previous talks to try and give a broad overview. But yeah, it'll be similar.
So tell your friends, we'll be offering several virtual programs each week in October. In about a week to a week and a half, they'll all be listed on the ATA website at americantopical.org.
Quick comment to Dr. Wang. The Statue of Liberty's from Las Vegas comment was based on the Mount Rushmore with the mask stamps that you put up. I don't know if you know Kaj in Las Vegas or not. He's a stamp expert with the virtual stamp club, and he has a similar item that he uses for his emails. It's, I don't know what stamp it is, but it has a mask on it with his name under it. So similar situation there. Anybody who wants to see the international mail restrictions and limits from the US can go to the website that I posted in the chat, and it will tell you who cannot accept mail. I'm rather surprised that the country of Panama is still shut down, but it's probably a local factor, not based on the limits of the canal. Back to Dr. Wang. Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw Jean's original presentation several months ago, and I'm really glad that I signed on today again, because there's a lot of new and more interesting things. Thank you, Jean.
Thanks, Jerry. I didn't even talk about everything. Like, there's so much stuff. So, I just tried to kind of hit the highlights, but if you look for it on the internet, there's all kinds of really interesting stuff. And I'm sure there's going to be more.
I just wanted to say, Jean, Dr. Wang, excellent presentation. I'm so glad I was able to be part of it and hear it all. It was excellent.
Thanks, Karen.
Very well done.
Okay, Hey, there's a comment on chat. Even when we go back to live shows, we can still have virtual presentations and additional to live. How does everybody else feel about that?
I'm
Yeah,
in
I
love
think the advantage of virtual shows, it allows people from all over to come. You know, our club has been doing virtual presentations every month, and we're getting people like Scott English signed on. You know, so we're getting lots of people that we wouldn't normally reach. So I think it makes the community really global.
Yes, I'm all for it. Please, it's great.
Here, here, and it allows people who can't travel much, or people who are like in Hawaii, and it's a long way to anywhere. So the virtual is definitely an aspect that should be considered for all future stamp conventions. Thank you.
Anything else? Any other comments? All right, well, we have one more meeting later today. Well, right now is the mobile post office board meeting. And then at 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, Lisa will be leading the Gay and Lesbian History on Stamps meeting. So if you're interested in that, feel free to get your registration in. Otherwise, if we don't see you there, thank you so much for attending SEAPEX. And hopefully we'll have a live show next year. And if not, we'll be right back here then. You all have a good weekend. Jean, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation.
Thanks for the invitation. Stay
Thanks so
safe,
much.
everybody.
And then a thankless plug for the weekly virtual stamp clubs online chat, very similar to what we're doing here. You can go to the virtual stamp clubs Facebook page and find the link to the chat that's at 1 o'clock Pacific time every Sunday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lefty. All right, catch you guys later.
Thank
Bye,
you, Jane.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.